Alright everyone, hello and welcome back to my channel. I've got a really fun topic for you today, so let's dive right on in. So today's topic is, what is in the art supplies that you use? What are they actually made out of? Which is super exciting. It was super fun to research and look up. I really enjoyed finding out about this stuff. And then I also think that it's also super useful to be able to understand what is actually in the art supplies so that you can use it most effectively. So that's pretty exciting. So we're going to talk about that. But first, let's talk about the artwork. So the materials I used for this one was I did a color mock-up on my iPad. So I used my iPad and Apple Pencil, then the Strathmore 400 series watercolor paper, my Reeves watercolor, and Princeton and Grumbacher brushes, and then some Micron pens. So that's what I did for the materials. The artwork was pretty straightforward. I wanted to come up with an idea that actually, connected to the theme and the discussion for this video. So I was just trying to figure out different ways to incorporate like art supplies into an artwork, and for some reason having a spiral of them came to mind. So I did a quick sketch on my iPad for figuring out the placement, how that would work, in the artwork, and then what colors I was going to use. Again, the colors didn't quite match up exactly what I had digitally because I can't make every color with watercolor. Some of them are just, too different, but I got pretty close, and I really like they're different colors, but I really like the color scheme that I did end up with. So, that was fine. And then the big challenge for this art piece was the wash in the sky. That was just really difficult. I don't know what it was about these paints that I couldn't get a flat wash. Part of it definitely was that, there was the big spiral in the background that I had to try and avoid. So it was kind of broken up, which was difficult, but there were parts that should have been pretty easy to do that I just could not get flat. I was trying to do not just like tone difference, but also a color difference, a hue shift, but I managed to do the exact same thing that I was trying to do up there with the water. I just got smooth transition. I did it all one wash, and I love the way it turned out. But I could not do it with the sky. Yeah, I think it definitely would have helped if I had had some masking fluid, which is definitely something I want to get my hands on in the future. Definitely with the amount of watercolor art I do, it would be really helpful and fun to try out. And it would have made this wash so much easier, not having to avoid every small little crevice of the art supplies. So yeah, that wash never got the way I wanted it to be, but I think it's fine. I got through it. I really love the colors and how they stand out. They're really pretty. But yeah, some of the actual technical work was a little difficult on this one. Most of that, I think that was all I wanted to talk about the actual artwork. So let's now get into the art supply discussion. What is actually in your art supplies? Alright, so the first thing I wanted to talk about were colors, because colors make up a huge part of art. Most art supplies have some sort of coloring in them, which, act in different ways, so it's important to understand what does what. So without further ado, let's talk about colors. Alright, let's talk about colors. Colors are usually a pretty important part of artworks and art supplies, so a lot of them have colors. And we're going to talk about two ways that colors are used in art supplies. So one you've probably heard about, it's definitely a pretty common term, would be pigments. But pigments are actually a pretty specific type of color, type of material, and it refers to the fact that pigments are little particles of color that are suspended in some sort of binder or solution. Whereas another way that colors are moved around would be in dyes. And dyes are pretty cool, but they're very different than pigments. So dyes are actually part of the solution. So they are not little particles, they are fully dissolved, which is pretty important. It actually has a big impact on how we use different colors and stuff. So like an example of how they're different would be pigments are like if you have muddy water, the mud will eventually separate out of the water, but when you shake it up, everything looks brown. Whereas dyes are kind of like sugar in water. The sugar totally dissolves, and it's not going to come out of solution. Usually, as long as there's not too much of it. So yeah, they're very different, where the dye is actually a part of the solution, which definitely changes how we use them. So pigments, when you use something that has pigments, the pigments lay on top of the paper, and they're just sitting on top, whereas dyes actually bind with the paper, which changes a lot about how they work and how you can use them, whether or not it's actually soaked in and binded with the paper, or if it's on top and you can still do stuff with it. So they're used in different types of materials. Pigments are, dominant in paints and inks, usually, like India inks. And then dyes are used for in markers and alcohol inks, those sorts of things. And that's a way that they're very, very important to how those types of materials work and how they're used. Another thing to think about for pigments and dyes is the vehicle that they are in is also important for how they work and how that material performs. So it's important to also think about that when you're looking at how the pigments and dyes interact. So that's all I had to say about color. Alright, first up I want to talk about graphite pencils, which are a little bit different because they usually don't have color in them. But they are a very important tool that probably most of us use for our art a lot. So basically what graphite pencils are is they're graphite, which is made out of carbon, and the graphite is just mixed with clay, which is how it can be molded and shaped. And then, it's just dried and put into wood casing a lot of the time, or, just shaped to go into a mechanical pencil, or, a woodless pencil or whatever. And it's pretty simple. You just have to have the right amount of clay so that, the graphite still works and is still erasable and that sort of thing. But it's still mostly just graphite and clay. That's pretty much it. Okay, next art material I'm going to talk about is acrylic paint. So it's a pretty important and widespread type of paint. And what it is basically just a pigment. So, one of those pigments that you can mix in. It's some sort of, colored particle mixed in with a sort of synthetic resin that is used as the binder. And the binder is whatever the pigments are mixed in with to make it a solution that is usable. So it's the synthetic resin part that makes it acrylic. So it's kind of like a plastic, and that's what gives the acrylic paint its qualities that are, super useful and important for how you do acrylic work. Alright, so the last one I wanted to talk about in this video is watercolor, one of my favorite mediums, and the one I'm using in this video, so I thought it would be appropriate to talk about it now. So watercolor is a type of paint, so like acrylic, it is using pigments, but it is very different than acrylic, and that is because of the binder that it uses. So watercolors have a water-soluble binder, which is what gives it its very unique qualities. So that's what allows it to be dried out and then reused because it's water-soluble. So the pigments can be resuspended that way by introducing water. And a couple of these binders that are commonly used are gum arabic or synthetic glycol. Both of those are, pretty common. It depends on the brand, and there are also different additives that different brands use to have their own unique qualities. But it's definitely, mainly those two, which is super cool. Gum arabic is pretty common in a lot of things, and it's really cool that, that's sort of the base of watercolor. So yeah, it's very important also to think about that, there are different brands and they use different types of binders, and they have different specific like places that they get theirs, and they have other additives that are important. Different types of paint can have different mediums that are added in that affect how the paint flows and what happens to it. So that's also an important thing to keep in mind, that this isn't everything that would be in paint. This is just the basics, and that sort of works generally for all types of materials. So yeah, that's all I have for today. There's definitely lots of other materials out there that I didn't cover that I would love to do for the future. So like talk about ink, oil paint, wash, maybe pastels, maybe some others if I think about them. I could do colored pencils, that sort of thing. Maybe in the future. It would be really fun. I really enjoyed doing the research for this. I was actually really surprised about how interesting it was to me to learn about this stuff. And I think I know a lot about the art materials that I'm using, but there's still so much to learn and so much that I didn't realize I was actually using. So I'm really glad I did this, and I'm definitely going to do another video like this in the future, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much for watching, and please like this video, subscribe, and watch a couple of my other videos if you want to. Alright, until next time, live life respectfully. Bye.